Gladius. The gladius was the most iconic Roman weapon and the primary sword of legionary infantry. Short, compact, and brutally practical, it was designed for stabbing rather than slashing. Roman soldiers didn't swing wildly like in movies. Instead, they stabbed from behind a shield, targeting the abdomen, groin, or thigh. It wasn't flashy, but it was extremely effective. The short length made the gladius perfect for tight formations. Soldiers could strike without breaking the line or exposing themselves. This gave Roman infantry a deadly advantage in close combat, especially against enemies using longer swords. The downside was reach. On its own, the gladius was limited. That's why it always worked as part of a system. Shield first, sword second. Simple, efficient, and terrifyingly consistent. Pilum. The pilum was a heavy throwing spear designed to ruin the enemy's day before the real fight even started. Legionaries carried one or two pila and hurled them just before contact. Once thrown, the pilum often bent on impact, making it useless to throw back and awkward to remove from shields. This wasn't an accident. A shield stuck with a pilum became heavy and unbalanced, forcing enemies to drop it entirely. Suddenly, Roman soldiers were facing opponents with no shield and very bad timing. The pilum wasn't meant for long-range precision. It was a disruption weapon, turning enemy formations into chaos right before the gladius finished the job. Scudum. The scudum was the large rectangular shield that defined Roman infantry. It wasn't just protection, it was part of the weapon system. Soldiers punched with it, shoved enemies back, and locked it together with others to form a moving wall. The shield's curved shape protected the body from shoulders to knees, making legionaries incredibly hard to kill from the front. Its weakness was weight. The scudum was heavy, exhausting to carry for long periods, and useless without discipline. But when hundreds of them moved as one, the scudum turned individual soldiers into a single armored machine. Pugio. The pugio was the Roman dagger, small but always present. It served as a backup weapon, a utility tool, and sometimes a last resort in desperate situations. While rarely the main weapon in battle, it was deadly at close range. The pugio also had a darker reputation. Because it was easy to conceal, it became infamous in assassinations and internal conflicts. In other words, it was just as dangerous off the battlefield as on it. Simple, compact, and personal, the pugio reminded everyone that Roman violence didn't always happen in open formation. Hasta. The hasta was a thrusting spear, especially common among earlier Roman troops and later used by certain infantry and cavalry units. Longer than the gladius, it allowed soldiers to keep enemies at a distance. In formation, the hasta created a bristling wall of points that discouraged charges and controlled space. However, it required discipline and coordination. A spear is powerful when used together, but awkward alone. As Roman warfare evolved, the hasta became more specialized, eventually giving way to other weapons better suited for flexible combat. Spiculum. The spiculum was a later evolution of the pilum used during the late Empire. Lighter and easier to produce, it sacrificed some of the pilum's brutal shield-destroying power for efficiency and range. This weapon reflects a shift in Roman warfare. Armies became larger, resources tighter, and speed more important than perfection. The spiculum wasn't better than the pilum. It was cheaper, faster to make, and good enough. That alone tells you a lot about how Rome itself was changing. Plumbata were small lead-weighted darts carried by late Roman infantry. Soldiers could throw them in volleys before the main engagement, creating sudden bursts of chaos. They were easy to carry, quick to throw, and extremely annoying for the enemy. Think of them as ancient pocket missiles. While they didn't replace heavier weapons, plumbata added another layer to Roman battlefield control, proving that Rome loved options almost as much as it loved order. Arqueballista. The arqueballista was a handheld mechanical crossbow-like weapon used in the late Empire. It fired bolts with impressive force and accuracy, bridging the gap between archery and artillery. While not widespread, it showed Rome's constant experimentation with technology. The arqueballista offered power without requiring years of training like traditional archery. Its main weakness was complexity. It was slower to reload and harder to maintain. Still, it represents Rome's willingness to adapt even in its later, more strained years.